everybody, and welcome to the Shift Book Club. I'm creator of the Shift, Sam Baker, and I'm delighted to be here with Saima Mir, author of our June book club pick, Vengeance. Vengeance is the second novel about Gia Khan, who had her debut outing in the Khan, where she was lured home to the north of England and ended up staying to run her late father's organised crime business. I mean, that's like the most inaccurate précis you've ever heard, but never mind. I first met Saima at the Cheltenham Literature Festival in 2021, where she was one of three brilliant women on the New Blood crime debut panel. The other two were Janice the Appeal Hallett and Zakiya Dalila Harris, who wrote The Other Black Girl. So, in fact, all three smashed it, which was nothing to do with Cheltenham. It was just luck. Sorry, let someone else in. Oh. Since then, The Khan did absolutely smash it. It was a Times bestseller, a Guardian best thriller, and a Waterstones thriller of the month. And I'm not even slightly surprised because Gia Khan is one of the most compelling and original heroines we've met in a long time. Are you dying? Yeah. I've got more. So
I'm totally dying.
Saima is a British Pakistani journalist who grew up in Bradford, West Yorkshire, which is absolutely not where Gia Khan lives. Her award-winning writing has appeared in The Times, The Guardian, and The Independent, amongst others, and her essay for the collection Not About the Burqa received over 250,000 hits online in just 48 hours. And by the way, the piece she wrote for The Shift last year, which some of you may remember, as a 48-year-old brown woman, I've been invisible as long as I can remember, refuses to budge from The Shift's top 10. And actually, I saw shades of that. I thought that shades of that feeling coming through in Vengeance. Right, the usual deal. We will try not to spoiler, but if you haven't finished, I know a couple of you haven't, just pop a note in the chat box to let me so I don't forget. And also, as usual, I'll save time for questions at the end. But if you've got questions, if you drop them in the chat box as you think of them, because it's good to raise them as we go if they're relevant. So really lovely to see you, Saima. It's been much too long.
It's been ages, hasn't it? It's always great to see you.
Before we get into Vengeance specifically, can you start by giving us a bit of background on Gia and a bit of a better description of what happened in the Khan? Without, well, actually, it won't be spoilering because you do drop it through Vengeance. But because I had already read the Khan and loved it, I just kind of went, oh, this will be no problem. Nobody will feel like they don't know what's going on. And when we had the chat last weekend, a couple of people were like, okay, I kind of wish that I had read the Khan because I think I would understand her more, from the get-go, not as
Yeah.
you go into it. So
Yes.
can you give us a bit more of a bit of Gia history?
So the Khan was where you met Gia Khan, wasn't it? So she was a London barrister. She's very successful, living this very glamorous life. And we know that her father is this criminal kingpin, and she's estranged from him. And then we meet her. I can do spoilers for the Khan, right? For this, I can talk about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you kind of say in Vengeance that, you know,
Yeah.
well,
So
you say it.
she has a son, a teenage son, and a husband who she's estranged from as well. So um, the Khan was very much her story as to her father's killed, and she ends up dragged back into this underworld that she's tried not to be part of for a long, long time, and how she's always thought life was really black and white, and when her father dies, she realizes it's not. It's very, very grey, and she finds herself caught up in that world of her brother's kidnapped and what happens next.
So who is Gia? What motivates her?
What motivates Gia Khan? I think it's probably at the beginning of the Khan, it was very much my dad's a really bad guy and he's done some bad things, and I just need to smash that kind of system. And then it goes on to she's a protector. She thinks that she's doing the right thing. She's protecting these people who her father's looked after. She's looking after the Khan family. Um, that's who she is, really. She's yeah, and a lot of other things. She's a baddie. Is she a baddie? That's the other thing. The thing I wanted to explore was the villainization of women. Whatever we do, it's not good enough. Um, so is she good or is she bad or is she just a survivor? I don't really have any answers. I just write her as she comes to me.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I had written down a question much further on about likability. And after I wrote it, I was thinking you just would not even be asking this if she was Michael Corleone.
Yeah, yeah. We wouldn't. And you know, that really struck me when the Khan came out and people were like, oh, we did not like her, or she was very cold. And I thought, no one says that about Michael Corleone, do they? It's just he's just a guy who's surviving and doing the right thing, and he's doing what he thinks needs to be done. So why do we care whether we like Gia Khan or not? Um, because actually she likes herself and she's okay with herself. So why do we have to put our two pennies worth in?
Does she so much in this book?
Say that again, sorry.
Does she like herself so much in Vengeance as she did in The Khan?
No, I think she's more conflicted, isn't she? I think she's at that point where she's just surviving and she's doing what she needs to do, so that the next generation doesn't have to do what she did.
So, what motivated you to create her?
So some of it was this idea of what if Michael Collin was a British Asian woman? Some of
So,
it
was that actively where you were coming from? That's not something that was layered on afterwards.
No, it was very much. So I watched The Godfather and I thought, this is a family. This is a really big Asian family. And then all the women I knew they never needed rescuing. I didn't know women who needed rescuing. I knew women who were British Asian, who were very strong, who were running businesses, who were being successful, and who were caught in between this kind of culture that was saying, oh, you need rescuing. So, white Western culture was saying, oh, these women need rescuing. And then they were like, we don't at all. And so I wanted to write a character that turned all the stereotypes on its head. Um, Also, I wanted to write somebody um, who was misunderstood, because I think she feels as if she's massively misunderstood. I was massively misunderstood. I always thought I was doing the right thing, and then when you realize sometimes people don't like you, and you're like, but why don't we like this person? So I wanted to explore that a lot. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm rambling. I was just saying to
No,
you,
ramble away,
I was just saying
ramble
earlier
away.
about this, the holiday coming up to the holidays, and my brain function seems to stop as we hit July. Yeah, she was. I just like the idea of exploring the difference between what a good woman is and what a bad woman is, and is any woman bad, or are we just surviving? And who makes the rules about what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad? Because all those rules are movable and shiftable, and all the discussions about Muslim women's bodies, who gets to decide whether a woman who's in a burqa is oppressed, or whether a woman in a bikini is oppressed by the expectations of society. So all of that was to be explored in Gia Khan.
Not much then.
No, not much. Not much.
Teeny.
Bit of crime.
So, why did you choose to do that in a kind of a gangland thriller format?
So I worked as a reporter in Bradford, and I was the only woman of colour in the newsroom when I started at the Telegraph and Argus, which was a local paper, and then when I joined local news and BBC. And so I got access to this world that other people didn't, because I speak multiple languages. Um, and so I would get told stories by people that other people wouldn't hear. And I got sent to court to cover things, and I got sent to crime scenes. And it struck me how um, monsters don't look like monsters. They just look like ordinary people. And one of the most defining moments was when I met the mother of one of the 7/7 bombers. And she was just an old lady in Beeston who happened to open the door to me. And her laundry was hanging outside. And her head was covered in a chiffon dupatta, scarf. And she came out and she said to me in Punjabi, why don't you people leave us alone? And then she saw my face and she realized she was, because there weren't any other journalists who were Asian around then, and she was so surprising. There was a moment between us where I just thought, this is an old woman. This is a little old woman whose son did something awful. and that image just stayed with me. And I think crime is a really interesting way to explore society and culture, and so that's why I wanted to write about it. I saw so Bradford was really interesting. There was a lot of black cash there, so there was, you know, there's this abject poverty, but then there's Bentleys driving around, and then there's a lack of role models, but then there's drug dealing that you might see happening right in front of you on the way home, and then there's beautiful places, and I just thought it was interesting, that clash of what's going on. And I didn't want to write highbrow literature. I wanted to write a commercial book that you could just read and just devour and be really entertained by. And so that's why I wrote The Khan.
So let's bring it back to Vengeance. So Vengeance picks up 2 years after The Khan left off. Why that time frame?
Because that time frame had passed between me writing and also me being given the deal to write the new one to be published. And also because at the end of The Khan, she was pregnant. And I wanted to pick up what it's like to be a woman running an organization with a small child. So that's where the 2 years came in. And also partly because I wanted her company to be grounded and to see what she would do next.
Because I wondered whether, when I was reading it, I wondered whether you scrolled forward 2 years in part because so that you just didn't want to waste loads of time on the whole pregnancy and childbirth shenanigans.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that either. I just thought I wasn't ready to write it. Sometimes books come to you the way they are and characters come out the way they come out, and they do with me. I sort of do a lot of thinking time, but they also just scenes come to me and ideas come to me. And you know the scene where she goes to the meeting and she kind of doesn't have any childcare and she takes her son with her? That came to me, and I thought, okay, so he has to be of that particular age. And also, how does a woman interact with it's very different interacting with a toddler to interacting with a baby. And so I didn't particularly at that time want to write about her breastfeeding and that kind of thing.
No. But I mean, how old were yours when you were writing?
So when I wrote the first Khan, I was pregnant, so I didn't know what motherhood was actually like until the baby was born. When it was published, he was how old is he now? So I think he was 7 when it was published, the eldest one, and I had a small 1.5-year-old. So Remy was 3 months old when I got the book deal. So I had 3 children, all around 5 and under, when I was working on this book.
And they have bags of personality.
They do have bags of personality. They're desperate to read the Khan. One of them sneaks up here to try and read them.
Oh Lord.
And all of that massively influences how you draw a character and how you understand them, and the invisibility of women.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was thinking about it and thinking of her, the way that she is. I hate the word juggle, but I'm going to be lazy and use it. But, you know, she's being a leader and a wife and a mother. And obviously, her father was a leader and a husband and a father, but that's a totally different proposition because
Yes.
got a whole house full of people running around looking after him. But also because of her age, because she's in her 40s, she's an older woman.
Yes.
And she's got that. I mean, I love you for making her menopausal because, you know, she's got that, as well as the invisibility of being a woman in Western society, in that culture. She's also being a woman, an older woman who's about to vanish. Technically, we're meant to believe, you know.
Yes. So, you know, what was interesting was when I found out I was perimenopausal, or when I started on HRT, I'd only stopped breastfeeding for 2 years. And I thought,
God.
this is crazy. I've just had my last child and it's been 2 years since I stopped breastfeeding. How is it that I'm now in menopause or going into
That's
menopause?
mad, isn't it?
Yeah. And nobody had told me about this stuff. And I hadn't, about, I mean, I know you talk a lot about menopause and I'm really glad you do. But before that, no one used to talk about it. We were just supposed to have these babies, have these careers and have these babies and carry on. And nobody told me the toll it would take on my body. Um, if I'd known, maybe I wouldn't have breastfed 3 kids. That's like 6 years of breastfeeding. That's
Oh
six
my
years of
God.
calcium gone from my body. And I wanted to talk about Jiachan like that. So I really feel that as women, there is this secret, and it's such an obvious thing, and I just didn't realize it, that, we were told that we can have it all. But actually, men never had it all, did they? As you've said, they
No.
had these armies of people in their house doing everything. And there was a wife in the 1950s who was doing everything, raising the children. And so when we went out into the world and we were trying to recalibrate, I feel like we were trying to reach for this standard that never had existed for anyone. And so for Giachan, I wanted to talk about that because she's of that age and she was raised with that idea of having it all. And like you said, her father um, had this army of people to help him, had this wife who did everything. And when people look at you differently when you're pregnant, they look at you differently when you carry a small child. She's this woman who runs this empire. And there are criminal women who run empires, who have babies and are pregnant and do go through menopause. Um, and it's so nuanced and it's so loud. I mean, imagine if Tony Soprano was going through the menopause. No, it's completely different conversation.
It would be more interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so much more interesting. When he was sat in his therapy chair and he was saying, "Look, I'm having these like hot flushes, or I can't sleep at night,"
Yeah.
whatever. It just adds more nuance and layer upon layer of intrigue and interest, and also makes you see the world differently. I just think we see the world differently because we stand at different vantage points.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to kind of go to pick up a bit more on the have it all thing, but I think if we start talking about the have it all, do it all thing, you and I will be here all
Yeah.
day, and we won't talk about so many other important themes. I mean, I think, but one of the things that it feels to me like a lot of the things that you picked up in the Khan that you kind of really doubled down on, the kind of, I mean, yes, the family and notions of home and duty, but in the Khan, the everyday race and the microaggressions of everyday racism. But in Vengeance, it's like you've picked that up and gone, yes, but where racism and gender meet, those micro, everything's double.
Yeah, everything is double, isn't it? One of the things I really wanted to write about, because I know when I write a book, I know how it's going to end. I don't know if people have
Did
finished
you know
it.
that right from the start?
Yeah, I know the beginning and I
It's
know the
interesting.
end, and I don't know the middle.
So did you know you knew the end, the very end of Vengeance?
I knew what the end was. It's like
Ah,
and I always know the end, and I always know the start, and I never know how I'm going to get from one point to the end, but I know the thing that I want to do at the end. So I know what. So if you know the end, you kind of know the theme of the novel, don't you? Because the theme of
mm,
Vengeance is very much justice for women, what justice looks like through the lens of women. And I wanted to explore very much that idea of um, this invisible workforce that runs the world without the financial power, because women do run that world if you think about, and as you said, the intersection of race. So for example, when I was at the BBC, um, the only time I would see people of color was when they would come in to do the cleaning at the end of the day. And a lot of other people have said this about institutions like that. And a lot of them were people of color and a lot of them were women. So, that intersection, that invisibility of these people coming out when everybody else is left with keys to these offices, what does that mean? And what if we all those women understood the power that they have, and if they came together, what would that mean? What could we not achieve, and what could we not do? And a lot of the Khan was Vengeance was about that for me. This idea of what if we could remind women that we're sisters? What if we could remind women across races, across class, that we are actually on the same team? And how much power would we have? And what could men do to counter that? Nothing.
If only we would work together instead of being constantly set against each other, whether it's by the media, by each other, by the kind of, they're setting you like I scribbled it down, like the offensive white woman in the airport.
Yes, yeah.
That kind of, that thing about, at the point when you discover you have a shelf life. And that's where the piece that you wrote for the Shift really came back to me, that where white women discover they have a shelf life, and you're writing that had come as absolutely no surprise to you because you'd always been invisible.
Yes.
And that kind of,
and
those kind of things about being prized and wanting
Yeah.
to hold on to your prize at the expense of other women.
Yes, and I really feel that so deeply as I get older, and I see young women. I see these beautiful young blonde women who are in their 20s and they've been conned. And I just feel such sadness. There's no rage in me because I just think I know that at some point you're going to wake up and you're going to see that you have a shelf life, and it's over. And you've been conned just as we've all been conned and we've all been lied to. And you think right now that you're prized, and but there's going to be a wake up call, and it's awful.
So we were talking before I let everybody in about the fact that I feel like Vengeance is, and I think like maybe what I'd written down was that I felt like I could feel like your rage and frustration, and it maybe is more frustration than rage, bubbling under through Gia.
I think
that we were talking about the fact that it's maybe the point that you start to see it.
Yeah. When I wrote the Khan, I think there was a lot of rage, and I didn't realize it until I came to read it back. And I've talked about this before with other people about. I read it back and I said to my husband, "I'm really shocked. There's a lot of rage on this page." And he said to me, "I've never known you to do anything that's light and breezy. All you ever do is dark and twisty." And so I think there was definitely rage in that. And Vengeance for me, because I'd worked through that rage in the book, and because I now anger and grief are like this. They're two sides and they're connected, I think. And I realized that when I sat with my anger, it was grief, and it was grief for loss of time, loss of sisterhood, loss of the things that I thought I could have had. And so Vengeance for me very much is more frustration. So it was very much this like clarion call of wake up and see what's happening in the world and how we're being turned against each other. And yes, some people can be angry and some people can be frustrated, and actually some of us are just grieving. We're grieving for the lives that we could have had.
And it's the time that we've kind of maybe wasted jumping through hoops or sitting in the boxes. I mean, I often feel that. And there's a line that I think it's not really a spoiler because I won't say which character says it, but towards the end, that's such a gut punch where a character says, "In a world where I'm not heard, I choose to stay silent." I was like, wow, that's just it's not even a gut punch, it's like straight between the eyes. But it sums up so much of the book, not just that character.
And don't we all do that? I had a meeting recently, actually this week. I had a really interesting meeting with somebody, a man, unfortunately, and he just talked, and he'd wanted to work with me on a project, and he talked and he talked and he talked, and I realized, because we've been in this room long enough, haven't we, to have been there before, and I thought, you're not hearing me at all, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to stay silent. So I listened, and he was on a phone call, and then on the other side of it, he said, "Are you still there?" I said, "Yes, I'm just listening. I'm just listening to you." But then he carried on, and I realized in that conversation exactly that line, which is, I I have finally understood what it is I bring to the world. And I've understood that no amount of shouting is going to make me be heard by people who don't want to hear me and understand. So if I realize that, I take myself off into another place and I'm silent, or I'm heard by people who do want to hear me, because I think the gifts that we bring are so precious that why waste them? Why waste them shouting at people who are just not worthy of listening? And I realize how that sounds that I'm saying it out loud.
No. I'm sure everybody listening will agree. And I really, I mean, in fact, there's definitely, yeah, we're agreeing. And it's like Jane's saying, she's marked out so many pages with those little sticky tab thingies. And when I was rereading it this week, I was like turning over all the corners. I didn't have a pen. And so when I was doing my script, I was trying to remember which bit on the page I've been trying to remember. But there's this, because I can't remember, there's a brilliant thing that the Parata patriarchy say, that women are only good for biryanis, and I can't remember the other words, and I couldn't find it on the pages I've turned over.
I have to
Can
look.
you?
I have to look back to that one.
You can't
Um,
remember either.
I, yeah, it's because
No.
I've been working on the new one.
Oh, is that another Geocan?
Yeah, so there's going to be another one. I've been asked by the publishers to write another one, which has been interesting actually. So initially they said we don't want another one because series don't really work, and then I worked up
I'm
another
sorry,
story.
what bullshit.
So it's interesting. And then my agent emailed me back to say, well, there's been an interesting turn of events, because my wonderful, wonderful editor, who I absolutely love, said that she'd been into the meeting and they said they want another one. So I asked my editor, I said, why, what changed? And she said, I think they read the book.
Do
So
you know
they
what?
read,
This is a boring publishing thing, but the sales directors have so much power,
yeah,
and the Khan sold. I mean, it sold really well, but it's just like I really worry for the editors, because the editors will say, I love it and I want it. And then they'll come back and go, the sales director says no. And it happens everywhere. It's not your publishers. It's
no, it's everywhere. It's
nuts.
totally everywhere. And I have a really good publisher. Um, but also, do you not sometimes I think it's a powerful book and the message is powerful, which is about sisterhood. And like you said, it's I try not to be, although it is about racism, there is racism in there. I think there is also this hope, this kind of kindness of, like, we're all going to be there at some point. We are all going to be invisible. And this understanding that this is where we wake up, and if we got things to teach each other, so that our end isn't as bad as it could be. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's too powerful. They don't want it out there.
Yeah. Did Nicholas ask, did you always envisage it as a series?
I no, I envisaged it as a single book. So because it was so hard to sell, as I've told you, you and I have talked about this. It just sat there for 7, 8 years, and nobody was interested in it because they didn't know what to do with it. Because
Mm.
I wrote something that wasn't out there. So when the Times reviewed it, they called it genre busting, which, it's a crime novel about a crime family. So
Because it wasn't a psychological thriller at the point that all publishers wanted to buy with psychological thrillers, maybe.
no, and it was a brown woman who wasn't needed rescuing. She wasn't the victim in the story as such. So they didn't know what to do with it. So by the time I sold it, I was just glad that somebody was out there reading it and that it was gone. Um, and then I think, or maybe they offered me, I can't remember if they offered me a 2-book deal. Oh yeah, so I wrote the second one and then I said, I think they offered me a 2-book deal, and I said, I just want to write one more book because I don't know if people are going to like the sequel. And then when the sequel came out, they offered me another one. So I didn't always envisage it as a series. For me, though, it's a trilogy, and the third one will be the last one, but never say never.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the 1970s and Akbar, the father. But before I do, I just want to talk a little bit about all the other women, because there are so many fantastic female characters. Um, were you thinking, because the Khan was optioned, wasn't it? Were you thinking, I just want to write loads of amazing female roles for brown actresses?
So what I was thinking was when I wrote the Khan, for me it was really a new novel thing to have this female Asian woman at the front of it. But actually, when I read it again before I started work on the second one, I thought there's not enough women in here. So she's heading up this organization, and actually,
Yeah, they were all,
they're all
apart
men.
from the women at home,
Yeah,
they were
they're all
all men.
men.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the moment I had that realization. I thought I cannot write a second book in all good conscience, thinking that I'm writing about smashing patriarchy, and this woman just keeps on running this organization of men, because actually nothing's changed, which is what used to happen years ago. And then, haven't we talked about that already and railed against it? So that's why there's a lot more women. That's why the end is the way it is, because right from the start, it was this woman, she's here now. She's got her feet under the table. She's been there for 2 years. Now she's going to make real change.
So when we're not recording, or at some point when I see you, I need to ask you a thing about the end. But
Okay.
I can't ask you on here because if anybody hasn't finished, it'll be like, what? What are you up to? So, 1970s. How did you go about researching that stone?
So I think it was in COVID when I got the deal. Yeah, I think it was COVID. So I did a lot of online research. I also have a lot of footage and photographs of my parents in the 70s when they came here with my dad, which I don't know if you've seen on my Instagram. My dad, very dapper in his suit um, with his cousins. So there's a lot of conversations with them. I went to the Dorchester to have a look around. I spoke to them about what the Dorchester was like in the 70s. Yeah, just a lot of conversations and a lot of digging into archive footage of my own family. And other people sent me images of their families as well, which was great. My dad's stories of being here and being young.
So did you do a lot of talking to your dad?
I do a lot of talking to my dad. I did, but also my father was not much of a talker. He was very funny, and he's very much likes to tell his jokes. But he's got to that age where they want to reveal things, and when you're not emotionally ready, I know I can read tough on your
Yeah.
face that moment.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm not
yeah,
listening.
I'm not. Yeah. So he wants to tell things now. So he told me something the other day, actually, which I thought was really interesting and actually really upsetting, which was that in the 60s, his cousins used to have a restaurant, the first Indian Pakistani restaurant in the city where they were. And he said, so obviously it was making curry, and he said that there was a coach station next to it, and that sort of women used to stand there with handkerchiefs covering their mouths because they used to say they didn't like the smell of curry, which would never happen now because everybody just walks past going, it smells amazing, we're going to go in. And I was thinking what it would have been like if you were a young man in your 90s, 19 sort of 20s, and being made to feel embarrassed about the kind of food that you ate and what it smelled like and what you smelled like.
That makes me think a bit about Gia's sister, is it Maria?
Yes, yeah.
And one of the things about that I really like about the book, and I think I wrote this down in connection to the rage, which is why I can't find the note, is the way that she comes into the real, in a way, in the Khan, Gia had lived a white life. And she's realized that in Vengeance, but Vengeance is also about Maria going on that journey
Yes.
about that being that person who won't eat curry, who won't eat paratha, who won't,
Yeah.
you know, who goes to the farmer's market and buys hummus rather than.
Yeah. There's, you know, there's, I think a lot of people go through that phase and where you distance yourself from your culture because the outside world has told you it's not good. We've been told these things were not good for us. Health wise, for example, growing up. And there's a line in the book which talks about that, which is ghee was, we were told when we were growing up, this is really bad for
Yeah.
you. And, you know, none of my family cook in ghee, and I don't like the taste of it because we were stripped of it because we were told it was going to cause heart disease. Now it's a superfood. Now we're supposed to cook in it. And there's a lot of these things that we were told South Asian diets were really unhealthy, and actually they weren't. If you're eating a whole wheat chapati and eating dal with it, it's not bad for you. So we did distance ourselves, and there is a refinding of yourself as you get older and you no longer care what other people say, and also an understanding of where you come from and actually how people were doing the best they could with what they had. They were immigrants, they were surviving. And but the journey's the same no matter what race you are, because we all learn to forgive our parents, don't we? If we learn to forgive them as we reach that age and we think it's hard.
I think you do a really good job of that with, I mean, Akbar's obviously dead in this book, but the journey that, I hate the word journey, but I never get through an interview without using it. That the journey that Gia goes on with her relationship with her father, like through his notebooks and through her own experience of becoming the Khan and learning what it means to be a leader and protect people and make decisions that affect other people's lives. That balancing act of, you know, the parallels that you draw between her relationship with him and then, I could be wrong, but I don't think so, hers with her relationship with Ahad, her eldest son.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how did you balance that and bringing Ahad into the equation?
How did I balance it? So the revelation about him being queer that's at the start is something I really wanted to explore. And I wanted to explore it in a way that hadn't been done in terms of parents. I didn't want to write about him specifically because I didn't think that was my place to do it as a straight woman. But I did want to explore it as a parent, as the fears that we have as parents. And I thought I could use that to compare how her parents were with her, which is, okay, actually, I love my child and I want them to be okay. And so my greatest fear is that something's going to happen to them because people are going to hurt them, not what's inside of them, but what the world is saying about them. And I kind of, that was the story where when she distances herself, you think, oh my God, what a bitch. What is she doing? Like, how can she not be okay with her son? And actually, it's because, yeah, she's being a bitch, but it's more about how she feels like her son is going to feel pain and he's going to feel pain. And then she is going to feel that pain through his pain and how she kind of navigates that. And I think I saw that a lot in my mother. And I see it in my mother, which is she raised me to be a certain way and I go out and live my life. And now she's scared because what if somebody says something awful to me? And people have, in her experience, said things about me. And I realized as I was writing it, so I came to an understanding of my own mother, which was she protected me from things that people were saying about me, but she was still hearing them. And so that stuff must have been hurting her. I don't know if that's a question.
Yeah, no, it does, because that sense generationally that Gia's father maybe, I mean, there's so many other things going on, but that sense of it not being that different.
Yeah,
maybe.
we're not that different, are we? And also, so much of it, it's exactly what you're saying. So much of it, yes, it's crime and they're baddies and they're criminals and they're carrying out all this stuff, but actually all people at the end of the day have a child in the same way. The ones who do, you give birth in the same way, you're pregnant usually in the same way. It doesn't matter if you're a saint or a sinner or whatever those things are. I wanted to explore the feelings that you feel when you become a parent and what that does to you when you are raising somebody and suddenly all of that unresolved trauma comes back. Because it's a mirror, isn't it? You're suddenly raising a child and you behave in the same way as your parent did to you, the parent who you've massively judged and thought was terrible, and then the words come out of your mouth that are the same as them. And in that moment, what that does to you.
It's just thinking it's, you know, it's very much a crime thriller, a gangland thriller. It's, you know, there's loads of body, there's like plenty of violence, there's tech crime, and yet we haven't talked about any of it. We've talked about family dynamics, and mainly we've talked about relationships. And that's one of the things that I really love about crime, is I think that the crime novels that really work are the ones that really, the crime is not exactly incidental, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
they're people first.
So that's exactly it with stories, isn't it? That's why stories are so powerful, and that's why they're so important, because they're actually just carriers for things that we learn about ourselves as human beings. So the crime bit is just like the vessel, isn't it? But the blood that runs through it is actually family, love, relationships, siblings, husbands, wives, partners. That's the thing that we all share, irrespective of where we live in the world or what color we are or what sexuality. We're the same.
Kim has asked if you already have the seeds of other novels in your head and are already creating other characters, or are you fully immersed in
I do have.
Khanland?
No, I do. I always have other stories. It's not the benefit of being older. It's not. You've lived so much that you always have other stuff to say.
Um, um, so the tech stuff, and
Yeah.
in fact the fight scenes and all that. Have you got like places you turn to?
So the fight scenes. I learn martial arts. My children go to martial arts, and our sifu. Right. So that's where vengeance began. It began with me having a coffee with my martial arts instructor and saying to him, I need to learn about, I want to start with a fight scene. I want to end with a fight scene. Talk me through it. And he's like a British European champion in Jeet Kune Do. And so that's where that comes from. Like, how can I kill someone with a scarf? Basically, those conversations. And he's like, I've got the perfect idea. Here's this video. Let me send you this. Oh, and actually you could kill somebody with this. So that's where that comes from. And the tech stuff, I actually now work in tech. So I have a side hustle.
Do you?
In consultancy, yeah. And I work for an AI company as a consultant, because I love tech and I think it's really interesting. And I think the best way to learn about stuff is to be immersed in it and to go meet people. So that's how I learn about tech. And at one point years ago, I had a tech startup. I'm just interested in what the future is and what it looks like. So yeah, that's where that comes from. All that research, going and talking to people and saying, so what are you doing? And then how can I turn this into a crime?
Fundamentally being a journalist, isn't it? Not the crime bit, obviously, but
Yeah.
the kind of finding stuff out bit. If anybody has any questions for Seema, pop them in the chat box. I can go back to some that I zoomed over. How important, well, this stupid question is obviously really important, but the kind of, the Khan was infused with a deep sense of the past, and you use loads of motifs from Pakistan history. And again, there's more of that, and the sense of empire and what people think, what people believe they know about Islam versus what people, what the truth is, like what's in the Quran and what isn't in the Quran, but people think is in the Quran. How do you balance that? Do you put that in as you write? Do you go back and put it in? Do you take it out? What's the approach with that?
So I put it in as I write, and I very much write it as a journalist, which was a piece of advice I got from an editor when I worked in telly, which was take the facts, throw them away, and tell the story. So you can go and write a lot about theology. I could put paragraphs in, but nobody's interested in that, and nobody really cares. You just have to give it a flavour of what that is. So I try and use it really sparingly, and put little bits of it in and not write too much. But I write it as I go, and I usually know what I'm going to add as I'm writing.
So what's happening with the TV? Because the Khan was optioned, wasn't it?
So it's been optioned. We now have a writer, fantastic writer, who worked on a show called Bodies, which is on Netflix, which is that sci-fi documentary, which was fantastic. She's wonderful. And we should know soon, really. It's with the same people who did One Day, the new version of One Day.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and they're great. I absolutely love them. So watch this space. They've optioned Vengeance and The Khan. So hopefully
That's fantastic. Were you not tempted to write it yourself?
So I wasn't tempted to write it myself, partly because I didn't understand the mechanics of how optioning works. And so when they offered it, my agent said to me, look, they're not going to take you on to do the writing. So I was just so pleased for them to take it away and to learn. And now I'm an advisor on this one. So they come to me and they ask my advice. And I'm quite glad not to be writing. I do write screenplays, and I am interested in it, but not for this one. I think I'm just too close to it. But as an advisor, it's very different.
And you mentioned One Day, I interviewed David Nicholls for his new book when he up here in Edinburgh, and he was saying how happy he was not to be writing the One Day script. That he, being too close to it, but also, other people can see what it needs that you couldn't see.
Yes. Yeah, completely. It's a completely different craft, screenwriting and novel writing. And I say this as someone who's just handed in a screenplay for something else. It's just so different. And I think the joy that I feel every time I look at The Khan and every time I look at the Vengeance would just be destroyed by writing this. So I prefer sort of getting the call of like, so what do you think about this bit? Or what do you mean by this bit? I love those kind of conversations. I get to have them.
Jane has asked, how did you go about researching any real life female family crime bosses?
Do you know, when I think it was when The Khan came out, there was a big double page in the Times about this crime family, these two women who'd been arrested, and they turned up with babies on their hips to do a massive drug deal at some not petrol station, service station. So I read the papers a lot, and I do because of that old habit as a journalist, and also because I have been a journalist for like over 20 years. There's just a lot of stored up information and stories and notebooks here and there, with bits about things that happen. You must have the same stories that you've liked, that you've cut out and kept, and you go through all books and you find them.
Yeah, it's mainly, I'm not very organized, and mainly it's crap in my head that I just know. And then I spend ages like rooting around on the internet trying to remember a name or a place to dig it out. Yeah.
One of the things that M.W. Craven said to me, he said, because I asked him about a bomb, I needed to make some bomb for something or other in a story. And he said to me, look, you can just make it up because these things move so fast that nobody's going to come and question it.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's one of the things about writing crime and the pace of science, is that actually, if you make it up, next week somebody will have made it. So it looks like that too.
What was important to you about setting it in the north? Was it in part because of where you come from and where you'd worked, or
It
not?
was a part because of where I came from and where I'd worked, and partly because I think it's such a unique place. I was also so tired of seeing a representation of that part of the world that wasn't true, that didn't fit with my experience of it. So the interesting thing about the Khan is different people see it different ways, and it's the same with Vengeance. You either see it as really gritty and poor, or you see it as sort of like high-end luxury Birkin bags and Bentleys and things like that. And I wanted to capture that, and I've not seen it anywhere else. I've not seen a place like that anywhere else in the world, really, that has that much conflicting stuff, contradictory stuff going on. But of course, I didn't put Bradford in there because it's crime, and I didn't want to malign it any further than it has been.
Yeah, or have the local gang boss around your house going.
Yeah, have him coming up. Although, do you know that when Mario
Or her, even.
Yeah, do you know that when Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather, and there was no such term as Godfather until he coined it and wrote it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then mafia bosses started watching his films and dressing the way that they did in his films and using some of that language and some of that speak. So, yeah, real life and art sometimes feeds each other.
Yes, yeah, it's collide.
Crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah, you've got to be careful what you write, what you make up.
So, what are you? Just like a nosy question, what are you? I'm going to say, what are you reading? I can't imagine you're reading anything. But what other crime? What other crime do you read?
So I'm at Harrogate tomorrow, and I'm on a panel with Chris Whitaker, who wrote We Begin at the End.
It's so good, the new one.
I haven't read it yet. I'm so upset because they've not sent it to me.
Oh my God, it's so fat. It will take you forever to read it. I'm going to see if I can
Is
find
it
it.
fat? I'm really.
Where's it gone? Yeah, it's up here. Sorry. Oh, it's huge. All the colours of the dark. And while I was away, you froze. Oh no, I've lost you. If you could, someone pop a thing in the chat box so I can find out whether it's me that's frozen or Seema that's frozen.
Sorry, I think I seem to lose you for a minute.
Oh yeah, I didn't know whether it was me that was frozen or you, but it was you.
Oh, yeah.
Very bad.
That's
He's lovely though. I interviewed him for We Begin at the End. He's really nice. This masterclass.
I can't wait to read it. That's the book I'm going to read this summer. So I'm reading Butter at the minute, which I do like a lot.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, I've read that. I really liked it.
So yeah, I'm reading that, and then I'm going to that's my book to pick up from Harrogate to get signed by him, because I just loved We Begin at the End. It just, Duchess, you and I have talked about this. She just lives in my head, and I absolutely love her.
I love Duchess. Well, you know, it's like, it feels like, sorry, we've gone right off on one, but I really, really do recommend this. And We Begin at the End, which if you haven't read is also fantastic. And Duchess Day Radley?
Yes, yeah.
She's the most fantastic character in here. There are two, it starts with two children and then follows them as they grow up. Patch and Saint. And they equal Duchess. You're going to love it. You're going to absolutely love it.
I do this weird thing. I think I've told you about it or tweeted about it, which is whenever I see a copy of We Begin at the End in a charity shop, I buy it, and I feel like I'm rescuing Duchess.
You have told me that, but I really like that idea. What do you do with the copies? Do you give them to people? You haven't got like a We Begin at the End graveyard.
I have had that here. No, because I give them to people because that would be really sad. I think I've got like a few copies of it here. But isn't that the thing about stories, is those people are so real. to us, and that they just live in our heads. And I think Chris thinks I'm mad because every time I see him, I'm like, Chris, I just want to talk to you about Duchess. Can we just talk about Duchess? So
Oh,
yeah.
well, you will. You'll definitely have new obsessions. Definitely.
That's amazing. It's fantastic.
Right. One last really, really trivial question.
Mm.
Can I get the recipe for scrambled eggs, tomato, fresh coriander, and green chili, please?
Oh yeah, totally.
Because it sounds really delicious. Is it? I didn't know whether it was just like literally how it sounds on the tin,
Yeah.
or whether there's some other cleverness going
No,
on.
it's basically that. And what's interesting is I've been in this writers' retreat in Italy in all of May, and I would make it in the mornings because there was a wonderful woman who'd do all the food, and she'd do all this fruit and stuff. And then halfway through, I was like, I can make my own eggs here. And eventually, everybody would come up and be like, "Can you just teach me how to make that? Can you just teach me how to make that?" So yeah, it's just a Pakistani omelette, although Dishum do one. So yeah. Go and try that there, but I will give you that recipe.
Yeah, you've got to send me the recipe, and then I've got to share it on the Substack chat.
I'll send it to you. Yep,
Brilliant.
fantastic.
Yeah, it looked. I was practically the first thing I read, and I was like turning that over. Right, before we wrap up, I'm just going to do a little intro to next month's book club, which I know that some of you already have. The next book club is Marian Keyes, My Favorite Mistake. So if you fancy a copy and you're not in America, I'm really sorry. I've asked publishers and they've said they're only sending UK and Ireland. Drop me an email afterwards and you get first dibs because you're here. Marian is going to be joining us on the 16th. It's a really weird one because we've had to fit in with her coming to Edinburgh, her tour. It's going to be 16th of August, which is a Friday, I think, and it's 3 p.m., which I know is like the worst possible time for everybody who's at work, but I think you can bunk off for Marian, can't you? So there we are. That's next month. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Sam. It's been really lovely chat. And at least one person has gone and downloaded the Khan while we've been sat here. So
brilliant.
really
Thank you
good.
so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Thank
I look
you.
forward to seeing you in Edinburgh.
Yes, and we'll do it again in Edinburgh.
Yes, we
See
will.
you then.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good school holidays.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye. Bye, everybody.